Okay, this plant is definitely in my top 10, maybe even my top 5 favorite plants. It's not a Monstera albo, but it sure looks a lot like one. And it's not a pothos, but it definitely is a beautiful plant. I love this plant. Hello and welcome to Peggy's Plants, coming to you from the Florida Keys. Today I'll be sharing with you my Epipremnum Pinnatum Albo Variegata. I just so happen to have a non-variegated version as well as the variegated version, so I wanted to show you what they both look like. Now, the most popular epipremnums that people are most familiar with would be the Epipremnum aurum, which are pothos. These plants are not Epipremnum aurum, they are Epipremnum pinnatums. Epipremnum pinnatums have become very popular recently, and if you're looking for one on the internet, just be aware that many people are selling pothos, large pothos, and calling them Epipremnum pinnatums or Epipremnums variegatas. So just be careful. You need to know what you're looking for, and that's one reason why I wanted to show you close up what these plants look like. The little holes in the leaves are like early fenestrations, and as they mature, they become more fenestrated. They look kind of like Rhaphidophora tetraspermas. And then later on, they look kind of like Monstera deliciosa leaves in terms of the fenestration. It'll be up the full length of the leaves, but very beautiful plants. The non-variegated plants do not cost as much as the albo, obviously, but they are highly sought after as well. And as they get their fenestrations and things like that, they're very beautiful plants. So if you're not wanting to really put out the money for the albo, I would definitely say check out the non-variegated version. You might be interested in them as well. I've had my Epipremnum Pinnatum Albo Variegata for about, I would say, 6 months now. And this is what it looks like today. It's put out some new leaves for me, a solid yellow one. As you can see, some of them have the white variegation, and that same plant can have some cream colored variegation. But this plant has come a long way with me and has been through quite a bit. I was trying to remember where I purchased this, and I can't remember. I know it was an international purchase and it was in the mail for a matter of weeks. And when I got it, it was very lanky on a long stem, lost most of its bottom leaves. And so I decided to cut it back and took several cuttings from the stem of this plant. Main part of the plant that still had leaves on it, I put it in some hydrogen pellets, or most people call it Leica, and with a little moss to help retain some moisture. I put it in here and let it root. And it developed a nice healthy root system within a matter of, I would say, 3 to 4 weeks. And then I was able to go ahead and pot it up in the pot that I just showed you in the earlier shot. And I decided to take the rest of the stem from this plant and cut it up into individual nodes. I didn't want to run the risk of like just putting one stem in the water or whatever, and then if it didn't root, I could lose the whole stem because the stem was so very long. So I decided to cut it up in individual nodes. I put the cuttings on a bed of sphagnum moss. This is actually in a fast food takeout container that I used because it was clear, had a lid. I figured that would be perfect. This is what it looked like after just 1 week in my grow tent. As you can see, it already had started sprouting. So, and developing some small roots. This is a very fast growing tropical plant and it is a climber. So these things root kind of effortlessly. After being in the grow tent for about 3.5 weeks, The nodes have sprouted leaves. They've sprouted some nice rooting systems. The warmth in this grow tent with all of the light that it puts off and the warmth, the humidity, it was just the perfect environment for these nodes to grow. And if you look down here, you can see that the roots are even down in the bottom of the container already. I mean, these really have some robust root systems going. And look at all of those leaves. Excellent. 3.5 weeks, that's it. These are also cuttings that were taken from that mother plant, but these nodes had roots on them already, although there were no leaves on these either. But they were larger cuttings with roots already, and they quickly developed leaves. So I've already potted them up. They're thriving, doing quite well. Some beautiful variegation on these albos here. Just absolutely beautiful. And again, these are very fast growers. You can see most of the variegation is green and white, although some of it is also the cream color. Just a beautiful plant, really. I've decided that it's time to go on and pot these cuttings up in some soil. There's a couple of reasons for that. One, they have nice root systems now, and I want them to transition from the moss to the soil as easy as possible. So I don't want them to get used to living long term in the damp sphagnum moss, because then it makes that transition to soil just a little bit tougher on the plant. Another reason that I decided to go ahead and transition them now is that because I can't put the lid on this container anymore because the plants have gotten a little bit taller and the leaves are hitting the top of the container. So I can't leave the lid on, and it makes it harder to keep the sphagnum moss damp. So look at that root system. I mean, just plenty of roots there. I could have already transitioned these. I mean, just based on the root development, they would have been fine. But the more roots you have, the easier the transition, the more you know that the plants can anchor themselves and take in nutrients and stuff through their roots. It's just kind of, in my opinion, a fine line. You don't want to let them stay in there for 6 months or so and struggle to transition to soil, because some of those water roots are going to die off. So this way it just, minimizes that issue. So I'm just going to sit here and carefully pick off as much of the sphagnum moss as I can without damaging the root of the plant. And this looks good enough here. I didn't get all of the sphagnum moss, but that is fine. So what I'll do is just hold the plant in position where I want it to, where I will want it to be in the pot, and just go ahead and pour the soil in. Now, I'm not using the same soil mixture that I use for my philodendrons, because these Epipremnum like to have their soil just a little damp, at least in my experience. The soil needs to remain somewhat damp, not wet. They don't like their roots to remain wet. So if you do that, you run the risk of rotting the roots. So before you water it again, let it kind of dry out for the most part. And then once you can put your finger in, say 2 inches, then go ahead and water the plant again. Do it a thorough watering and then wait. And your plant should be fine. But it's definitely not, the soil mixture isn't as heavy in perlite as I would use for my philodendrons, because I do want it to retain some of the moisture. And then I'll just give it a little bit of water to kind of water it in. I will keep these plants a little more damp than normal, just to help them with that transition, since they're used to being on a bed of damp moss. You don't want to just put them in soil and let it dry out. Now, this is another look at the mother plant, and you see that leaf that's totally yellow there. Not exactly what you want because there's nothing to help with photosynthesis, but I'm thinking that, yeah, look at this root down here. I think that that root is probably to this all white cutting here. So, yeah, not what you want when you have an albo, but thank goodness there's several other cuttings in case this one doesn't make it. When you look at your albo, you're buying an albo or you have an albo and you're taking cuttings or something like that, you want to make sure that the stem has some green in it. Look at all of that root. That's pretty impressive for 3.5 weeks. But you want to make sure that there is some green as well as white on that stem where you're cutting from so that your leaves come out variegated. Now, I know the all white leaves are pretty and things like that, but they tend to not live because you need the green for photosynthesis. So this is not my most promising cutting, although I have leaves and another leaf coming out. Hopefully, one of the future leaves will kick out some green, and after that, I will have some green variegation. But at this point, it's not looking too great because it looks like the next leaf is probably going to be all white or yellow as well. All of these came from the same plant. It's just funny how some of them you'll get nice variegation and others you'll get a solid leaf. Nice root system. Absolutely nice root system though. So I'm still going to pot this one up and hopefully, eventually some variegated leaves will come out. Because there is green on this cutting, on the stem cutting. So yeah, just some tiny bit of green in the middle of this plant. So just, kind of a word to the wise, be aware that if you see someone advertising an albo cutting, and I don't care what kind of albo it is, if the leaf is all white and it doesn't have any green leaves, you may want to think before you buy that particular cutting. Because again, without the ability to photosynthesize, that cutting is not going to make it long term. You need some green in those leaves. You really do. Another question that I was getting from some of my viewers about transitioning plants from the grow tent. And there's a couple of ways you can do this, and I've done it both ways. These plants, the ones I'm potting up, I am not going to leave in the grow tent. I could water them up, put them in the soil, put them back in the grow tent, let them stay in there for a while, and then kind of transition them by taking them out for a few hours a day. That's kind of a way you can do it to kind of babysit it, because there is going to be there is going to be a drastic change in environment. I live in the Florida Keys. It's hot here. We run our air conditioner year round. In that grow tent, it's pretty warm and very bright. So in my home, it's much cooler than it is in that grow tent. But it shouldn't be a drastic enough change that it's going to cause them to go into distress or anything. So I don't plan on doing the gradual removal. I'm just going to put these cuttings in pots today, and then I'm going to put them on my plant stand under the grow lamp with the rest of my plants. These won't go back into the grow tent. And here's how that one is looking. Hopefully that will start kicking out some green for me. We'll have to wait and see. I'll keep you guys updated on that one. As you can see, I have quite a few cuttings from this plant. I didn't lose any of the cuttings. They all sprouted leaves, all got roots, beautiful roots. Look at this big clump. But so I didn't lose any of the cuttings, and for some reason I just kind of expected that there might be a few that made it, a few that didn't. but that's not the case at all. They all rooted very quickly, effortlessly. I didn't have to do anything special. Now, before the cuttings have roots, it's just water, regular water that I put into the sphagnum moss. But once they actually have roots and can take in nutrients, I do use my water with my fertilizer mix in it to moisten the sphagnum moss. Before the plants have roots, or before the cuttings have roots, there's really no use in giving them nutrients because they can't take them in. Once they have roots, they can take in the nutrients. So I start going on and giving them a weak mixture of fertilizer at that point. And I do think it helps. But, it's a matter of personal preference. Do what works for you. And that's just what I do. Once my cuttings have roots, I go ahead and start to fertilize them. These plants, these Epipremnum Pinnatum Albos, very highly sought after right now. They're kind of a hot ticket item, a little on the pricey side. They're not like your Monstera Albo. They're not at that price point, but they're not a plant that right now you're just finding nice roots. But they're not a plant that you're really just finding in your big box store or anything like that. Beautiful variegation. They do look a lot like pothos, so it's kind of important that you know what you're looking for so that you don't go out thinking that you're purchasing an Epipremnum Pinnatum and you're actually paying a lot of extra money for a golden pothos or something like that. So do be careful. Make sure you're buying from someone that you know and trust, or that you feel like is reputable, before you make that purchase. Now, this plant, like most that I gravitate towards, is a very easy plant to care for. I think that any beginner would be able to successfully grow this plant. The only reason at this point that I would shy away from it as a beginner is because of the price. So you might want to wait until that price comes down if you're someone who is a beginner to plants. But as in terms of skill level, this is a plant that anyone could grow. I wouldn't hesitate to buy a cutting of this plant because it roots quickly and easily, doesn't have any special requirements, and it's a fast grower. So in an effort to save some money, if you have the opportunity to buy a small cutting and watch it grow, it's not one of those plants that's going to leave you hanging around for a year and it's just a little sprout. They do grow quickly. So these last couple, let's see, I think they are still kind of small, so I am going to, I don't think I'm going to pot these up. I think I'm going to leave these in the sphagnum moss. They're small enough for me to put the lid on and put them back in the grow tent, so that's what I'm going to do with these. And then I'm sure I'll end up trading some of these because I won't need all of these plants. But just wanted to share that with you. I hope that you found this video helpful, some of the information very useful to you. But a new plant out there that's in the spotlight, and I just wanted to make you all aware of it. I'm enjoying this plant. Like I said, it looks a lot like a Monstera Albo. Costs a little less at this time than a Monstera Albo. So if you're not someone who's willing to put that kind of money into a plant, but you want something with that look, this is definitely one. Look up this plant on the internet and see what the what the fenestration looks like on a mature plant. These are beautiful. The non-variegated version of this plant is extremely beautiful as well, especially when it's mature and the fenestrations are, it's fully fenestrated. So I'm going to go on and close this up. I'm going to add this plant in there too. It's not from this plant. It's a whole different plant, but I'll stick that in there to save space in the grow tent. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me today. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comment box below. Thank you so much for stopping by. I appreciate your support of my channel. Take care, stay well, and bye-bye. Have a great day.